Our friend Bill was reading the book Hanta Yo, an American Saga, a novel that was written, I think it was the 60s or the 70s, and it's about the Lakota Nation and how they lived their lives, what was important to them. It was created from the pictographs of each season, all the highlights, and the author interviewed several different storytellers and keepers of the word and created Hanta Yo. As Bill was reading this, everything seemed familiar. He recognized many things. A deep yearning within his soul got stirred up a little bit because it sounded so familiar. Then he read the word Heyoka, and every nerve in his body triggered, and he had goosebumps everywhere. Some reason this word meant something to him. He didn't understand why at the time, but he soon would find out. Welcome to Spirit 360 Fellowship. We are a community of like minds, kindred spirits, old souls, empaths, highly sensitive people, and intuitive feelers. We're all seekers, searching for answers to life's problems, but not any type of answer, a spiritual answer that comes from within ourselves that informs our next step with a spiritual solution. I'm T.S. Hall, the Stoic Medium, and I'm always here to help you rediscover your spirit's intent and boldly and with confidence walk your path purposefully to fulfill that spirit's intent. How do you tap into those experiences that are part of you from your past lifetimes? Because this isn't your first rodeo. You've been around the sun a time or two in different bodies, in different vehicles. Sometimes you were an empath, sometimes not. Bill's Heyoka Empathic experience was revealed many years before he started his spiritual growth and development practices. He had always been interested in Native Americans. He had always been interested in psychic stuff and reincarnation. One of the other books he read was The Reincarnation of Peter Proud, and some of it made perfect sense, and while other parts of it were fictionalized, he could tell. But as he began to deepen his spiritual growth and development practices, several things happened. He started to listen to that voice within, that wee little voice that is contrary to the major voice in his head, the instinct that is the major concern that was managing most of his actions, versus that little wee voice of knowing that always seemed to want him to do something slightly different than what he thought he wanted. He realized that over the course of his life, he always had a sense, not a complete knowing, but a sense of what was going on with other people. He was like a chameleon, so if he hung around with someone, he would take on the traits and the feelings and the essence of that person. He was always contrarian in nature. If you said black, he would say white. He was always for the underdog, not the favored winner. He had a healing, humorous nature. Some thought was sarcastic because he was such a contrarian. His intuition was heightened, but he didn't know what to do with it because as a male, he didn't necessarily feel that being intuitive was a good thing. He had been ostracized for it many times in his life. He often and always felt like an outsider. He was that lone wolf, that sheep that's always on the edge. I think some people call him a black sheep. But he was a seer, a protector, and a truth teller. Even when that truth telling got him in trouble and it wasn't perceived as a good thing. But the whole new significance began to unveil itself. Many years after reading Hanta Yo and having that experience of hearing Heyoka and having his whole body react and having goosebumps everywhere, because he was becoming one with nature himself and spirit. And one of the first spirits he met out of necessity was his protector guide. His protector guide was and still is a Lakota Indian, a Native American who stands right behind him, always has his back, and on a couple of occasions made sure that he didn't cross over too early so he could accomplish what he incarnated to bring about. So as he began to understand the nature of his past lives and connection with the Lakota people, Everything was brought to a crystallized, perfect moment in time as he was driving in Wyoming and came around a curve. And as he came around this curve on the road he was driving upon, he looked across a meadow. In front of the meadow was a pond. And in that pond and at the far side of the meadow, he saw the Grand Teton Mountains for the first time in this body, this lifetime. The moment he saw the pond, the meadow, and the Grand Tetons, he knew he had been there before. He had seen that very view previously, but not this lifetime. Again, the goosebumps showed up. His entire car was filled with hundreds of Native American spirits. He had to pull over because the impact was so powerful. And as he sat in his car looking at this view, he rolled down the windows and recognized the smell. And as he recognized the smell, 1,000 mosquitoes came into his car. So he had to put up his windows and spend an hour trying to get the mosquitoes out of his car. That's why I was laughing at you all talking about mosquitoes earlier. But he knew he had been there before. He knew that he was connected with these people on a more profound, deep level than he ever knew. And it was this connection that began a slightly different course in his life. And he began to see during the rest of this vacation and this retreat he was taking that many of the modern day challenges he had were blind spots of his empathic ability that allowed him to see things others were not interested in. People were overwhelming because they were so sad, so upset, and there were so many lying, loving things instead of people. That just ate him up on the inside. He was always feeling misunderstood. His intentions were always questioned because most people are not altruistic. Most people are transactional. His energy would drain quickly because he spent so much time trying to protect himself from the energies around him, the lies around him, all of the mischief around him. He had difficulty with boundaries because he felt he didn't need boundaries, but he often got burned because he didn't set and establish the rules or the rules of the game with the people he was engaging with. He was balancing this contrarian nature with social harmony. And a lot of times, if you don't go along with people, they actively try to take you down. They will gang up on you. And that always took a lot out of him. And reconciling the lies that lying, deceit, and greed, it always saddened him. One of the things about being an empath is our empathy, where we can feel and experience what others are going through. Or so he thought. The interesting thing about having a spiritual growth and development practice is you begin to see how much your mind influences what you think you are experiencing. As he began to detach from the emotional baggage he was interjecting into the experiences he was having of others, a light showed up at the end of the tunnel, a path to freedom that allowed him to not take on what he felt someone else was going through, his own filters, through his own experiences. He saw things as they really were. He got fully present in this moment, at this time, detached from any mischief his mind was creating on the experiences he was encountering. He began walking a path along his life's journey that was the middle of the road, the straight and narrow, allowing him to experience moderation in thoughts, in feelings, in emotions, in his actions. And that, my friend, allowed him to not be too happy, not to be too sad, not be too upset, not to be too angry, and not be too overly reactive to what he thought other people were experiencing. And as he began to mature spiritually in this transition from a Judeo-Christian religious background into a fully spiritual encounter of connecting with the energies and the infinite intelligence of the universe, he began to see where he was causing his own suffering. And that, my friends, was a get out of hell free card. Because as he became responsible for his role in the suffering that he allowed himself to experience, he was able to breathe. He was able to start recognizing the beautiful souls and spirits he was attracting around him. The earth angels that had been around him his whole life, but he was too busy to notice them. So as he recognizes that man in the mirror as a good person, a spiritual entity, he started to forgive himself from all of his past transgressions, all of his imperfections. And as a perfectionist, his imperfections were always at the foreground of his awareness. Honoring his boundaries. And that, what I mean by that is, when you create a boundary, the biggest reason empaths and highly sensitive people have struggle with it is because you have to manage that boundary. And that's not always easy. He embraced his uniqueness. He embraced the uniqueness of others. He started to appreciate his humor consciously. He went from sarcasm to deep insight and put a little soft edge of compassion on it, which allowed him, instead of to feel like he was attacking people, having people perceive that he had a deeper understanding of what they were experiencing and going through. He was being grounded all the time. He was always grounding, being in a place of mindful presence. At this moment, mind, body, and spirit aligned with one intention to accomplish that next right action. He started to mastering his intuition, his ESP, and his mediumship in verifiable, accurate ways, where there was no doubt that he was hearing that voice of knowing, and it began to overshadow that intuitive voice, or that instinctual voice of survival. He started to allow himself to embrace community. He still wasn't very outgoing, still quite shy, a bit timid around other people, but he embraced community because he found a place he could be himself. And by being himself, he granted that state of being to others. And that was an experience where he didn't have to keep his defensive walls up all the time. That was freedom for him. And he started to rediscover his spirit's intent, knowing who he was, why he was here, and where he was going. And the moment he looked at that man in the mirror one day and fell in love with that guy, with compassion and understanding and acceptance, the trajectory of his life changed. And he started to be able to make the decisions and choices to remove certain people from his life and allow other people in, to follow a course that purposefully expressed his intention for being there in this world as he exemplified his values and beliefs. And this spiritual path, the permission to be yourself, the permission to be you, unveiled several things for him. That life is as simple as you allow it to be. Most of us get bored when things are simple. Most of us seem to have this knack for wanting drama to keep things a little exciting. He started to embrace the role of the sacred mirror. What I see in you is a reflection of me. Namaste, me recognizing the spirit in you and allowing the spirit in me to be in the foreground. The protector of self, loved ones, and truth. Not as a physical protection. Sometimes it has to go that way. But as the permission to allow other people and himself to express themselves as they truly are. To embrace his contrarian nature. That part of him that doesn't quite think things are exactly as they should be. And trust that the path to get there is a noble, lifelong pursuit of spiritual truth and integrity, a rigorous self-care and nurturing. And this is the one that took him the longest to take care of, because when you allow extreme self-care and nurturing, that means you have to say no to a lot of things that have given you great joy over time. But that moderate path, that straight and narrow, is the quickest way to find that voice of inner knowing. And as a person who is an empath, a psychic connection with others where you can read and perceive their energy, you have to take care of yourself. You have to learn to cleanse away that which no longer is relevant to you. Because other people's stuff is their stuff. Your stuff is your stuff. You're responsible for your stuff. But if you take on someone else's stuff, you got to figure out how to manage that in a way that honors them and honors yourself. And as he allowed himself to walk his path purposefully, exemplifying his values and his beliefs, Bill started to find that he was answering the knock to different people just like him. And his connection with them, his insight, his understanding exactly what they were going through without taking on their burdens, taking on their problems, taking on their stuff, allowed him to shine his light in such a way that while he was connecting with other people, it would illuminate their pathway as they walked alongside him on his journey. He began to become comfortably at home in his own vibration. Exactly how he is and exactly how he's not. Being himself. And that, my friends, is how you can take an abstract, ageless concept of being an empath, a protector of the truth, and allow yourself to be who you are and apply your empathic skills and abilities to yourself first to inspire that in others. That, my friends, is a noble and worthwhile cause. My highest blessings.